Welcome to Session 2, Defining the Term Conversion. This is the second session of MMC 5436, Messaging Methodologies and the Practice of Conversion Optimization. Today we are going to begin by looking at an experiment where properly defining KPIs has a major impact on long-term revenue. From there, we'll learn the meaning of the terms conversion and conversion rate within the context of marketing. After watching this session, students will be able to define two critical concepts, conversion and conversion rate. Understand why it is critical to determine what conversions we are measuring, necessary and sufficient, when optimizing our messaging. Articulate the potential dangers that exist when optimizing for the incorrect conversion. We will now join Dr. McLaughlin in the MECLABS Institute studio to explore the term conversion.
Welcome, we're beginning session 2, and I'd like to get right into a case study. You'll notice this is test protocol 1739. And it's important that we're focused on the research question as you look at this contextual background for the experiment. Which price point will generate the greatest financial return? Now, that question is vital. That is a research question, but it's also the question I have for you. So I'm going to show you the context, this time in the form of the collateral. You can see there's an offer at the top of this page, and there's an introductory period of 99 cents, and then what do you pay after that? You see the 3 question marks, the rate of X per week. You've got to determine what X should be. So take a look. These are the potential price points, 99, and then it continues to 199, 299, 399, and 499. You see it, and then you need to become, for just a few moments, the expert marketer in charge of answering this question. I use expert in the form of irony. What would you do? But what would you do if this were you? Which price point would you select? And bear in mind that all over the world, decisions like this are being made without experimentation or a rigorous methodology to guide the process. Part of what you're here for and the reason that you're taking this course is to learn a way to get to the right answer. And so, in doing so, think about your answer, and then I would either write it down or at least somehow in your mind or in your notes, answer a second question. Why? So if you chose treatment 1, $1.99, tell me why. Now, I need you to think about that in your own mind. I'm not really needing this. It's not a test. It's not going to show up on your course evaluations or anything, but it really is essential for you to join with me. If you want to learn and really understand the value of what we're trying to achieve together, you've got to really participate. And when I ask you for a reason, what I'm really doing is forcing you to generate a hypothesis. We often do this without realizing it. So we have these implied hypotheses, and they're not very sharp. They're not very articulate. We haven't worked them out. In this case, one of the things you'll learn as you continue to train is that you must be very intentional about your hypothesis. So there's a 2-part question. Which one of these will produce the most revenue, and why do you think so? Now, let's assume you have that answer formed in your mind, and let's go forward. Well, I'll show you the results of some of the data sets from the test. Look, if you'll try to make sense of this chart, you'll note that in that middle column, the offer response rate, that's your conversion rate. And it's important, and I emphasize the word conversion because today's class is going to be all about conversion, and it's a little bit more complex than we often realize. Take a look at this, and you'll see that if you chose the 99-cent price point, you certainly were right in this much. It had the highest number of people who said yes. But is it still the best choice for the business leader and the marketer who's trying to answer that bigger question? Because the question I want to stress was not which price point will produce the most subscribers. The question was which price point will produce the most revenue. So as you consider that for a moment, I'd like to sort of prepare you. We're going to come back to this experiment, but I want to broaden our understanding of this whole concept of conversion. So let's move on. All right. you'll notice the heuristic that we talked about last week. C equals 4m plus 3v plus 2i minus f minus 2a. C represents the probability of conversion. And as we talked about last week, each one of those variables is going to inform how we work together, and it'll be the spine of the course itself. We're focused on C today. We're going to talk about conversion, and you really need to understand it for two reasons. The first reason, not as important as the second, but very important, you need to understand it in order to pass this course, and frankly, to have that solid understanding that would be expected of someone with the credential that's being provided as a reward for passing this course. Now, at the same time, there's really a more fundamental, more interesting reason why you need to understand it, and that is because if you're going to do the sort of deep dive through testing and the application of heuristics into the mind of the prospect that you're trying to reach, you really have to have a more robust understanding of the word conversion. Most of us have heard the word associated with click-through or sales or open rates or some of the words you see on the screen. Most of us have a basic understanding of what conversion is. But that's dangerous. As Peter Drucker said, adequacy is the enemy of excellence, and we need a deeper understanding, and that's the point of today. So here is the classic definition that you see in textbooks and dictionaries, and I know that even starting this way is a bit cliched, except in this case I think it's helpful because there's a word in the dictionary definition that I find really important. It's the word changing. And it says changing from one state to another. Think about changing from one position or one stasis or one condition. Conversion is that act or process of that change. And you can see its definition in Oxford dictionaries. You can also see a representation of conversion as we understand it in regards to H2O, and you can see it again in biology with this definition, and bear in mind they all have something in common. There's some sort of transformation taking place, moving from one state to another, from one stasis to another, which sets us up for understanding the marketing definition, which is really important for the purposes of all that we're learning together. So here is an official definition, one you'll need to know in your course. Conversion is the change that results from the influence of the marketer upon the prospect's free choice. Now, if you think about it in that way, you're going to be equipped to walk through an understanding of the thought sequence itself in the mind of the prospect as they interact with the value that you present. And you're going to understand when conversion rate should be X or when it should be Y, how you calculate it, but more importantly, on what ratios or at what data points do you perform that calculation. And if you want to take it to the next level, when you're designing your test, which conversion rate will matter the most? So to get to that place, let's work through the wording of this definition and just unpack it. So you see at the top, we're going to focus on the word change because every single word in this definition is important. And the change is essential because in the marketing context, it's a voluntary stasis change. And it is in its essence transformative. And you are, as a marketer, involved in a process that you can see outlined in this second point. You are trying to influence a voluntary change of stasis. For instance, the change from a prospect to a customer. Now, all conversion doesn't engage that particular activity, the influence activity. Sometimes conversion occurs because the individual makes a choice mostly on their own, without particular outside or overt or intentional outside influence. But in the marketing activity, we must somehow influence a party with free will to make a choice, to say yes, and thus, in responding, in actualizing that yes, changing their stasis. This becomes a move that, in simple terms, means they weren't a subscriber, and now they are. They weren't part of our community, and now they are part of our community. And this has multiple impacts and implications. It's also important as we think about this that we recognize that all of marketing is an influencing activity. And as we said last week, marketers tend to focus too much on claims, to try and, browbeat you into saying yes, or somehow speak louder than all the other voices you hear in the marketplace, as if putting an exclamation point or putting it in all caps or putting it in bright red or adding big pictures or saying it 10 times will somehow beat down your defenses. This is unproductive activity. If we were to take that same energy and apply it to the quality of our value proposition, we wouldn't have to yell so loud. We wouldn't have to work so hard. Marketing is an influencing activity, but that influence is both rewarding, and when I say rewarding, I mean to both parties. It's both rewarding and particularly effective when it's thought of as is articulated in the balance of this third point, as the synchronization of my desires with yours. If I'm the marketer, I want you to become, let's say, a member or a subscriber or a customer. But if I'm talking to a person who will truly benefit from making that choice, and if they're not sure it's the right choice, and I, with clarity, give them honest reasons that help them see that I represent the best choice or my product or my company, then I've done them a service. And I am utilizing clarity to help them draw a conclusion that will lead to a yes, that leads to a conversion, a change of stasis. Marketers, when you understand marketing in this light, it gives you a different way to come to work. You're not about talking people into things and hyping them, but rather about communicating clearly the right information to the right person so they can make the right choice. So as you think about conversion in that context, let's look at an example that we saw in a recent set of experiments. This is Test Protocol 1685. You're looking at an organization's attempt to convert you. They begin by running these ads, and frankly, the ads are hype-driven. And there's sort of an old school look about them in terms of how they push and they make excessive claims. We wanted to test a different way and see if it might outperform the others. Now, here is the treatment coming up, and you'll see that in treatment 4, there is a very clear statement of value, and then there is a sort of compelling video and an attempt to get you to respond to that will lead to more conversions ultimately. The approach, I mean, it does have sort of that cartoonesque look, but the approach is very different in tone. And if you compare that with the others, you now have a control and 4 treatments, 5 different ways to communicate. But the 5th way, we call this treatment 4 in the experiment, is very different than the others. So what do you think will happen? Well, here's what happened in the experiment. The 4th way produced 113% increase. That's conversion at the level of purchases. Well, what happened here? Well, sometimes all the hype gets in the way of the clarity. Now, if you don't have the best solution, clarity is your enemy. But if you don't have the best solution, then why are you foisting it on people? Our responsibility as entrepreneurs and as corporations and enterprises is to work hard so that we are the best or the right solution for the right group. We can't be the right solution for everyone, but for those that we can serve best, we should be serving them best. That's the foundation of understanding everything about the value proposition. Let's think about that now in this context. Here, in this particular case, clarity trumped persuasion. And I can tell you over and over again, if you get the value proposition right, clarity always trumps persuasion. Let's keep going. So, then we need to understand conversion. By broadening our understanding, we're going to be able to think more deeply about that initial experiment that we shared when this session opened. And you'll see that conversion always involves a sort of division activity, and it's exemplified in this simple slide, but it's the number of conversions divided by the total number of opportunities to convert. So that can play out in a lot of different ways. Right now, we know that when 100 people enter our funnel and 2 people convert from being prospects to customers, that a simple calculation using division tells us that our conversion rate is 2%. Now, I slowed down and said that very carefully because I'm trying to help you be ready for all of the coursework that follows this. And That basic calculation and that basic understanding is foundational. And candidly, I think many marketers are well aware of that. So how do they get in trouble? Because they do, and they often get in trouble over this conversion concept. They haven't thought it through. Now, there are many kinds or places that we can measure conversion. So you'll see here, it's the number of people who enter a store in example 1. In example 2, it's the number of people who open an email. In example 3, it's the number of people who visit step 1 of a checkout process. These are all and can all be forms of conversion. But not all conversion rates are equal in terms of their importance to the enterprise. Indeed, how you measure conversion can be incredibly important to the ultimate performance of the organization. You have to understand a sort of philosophical concept that is the difference between the necessary conversion rate and the sufficient conversion rate. And now I'm sharing something with you that, unless you've had training in philosophy, you might never have seen before, but it does try to illustrate this point. I won't break the slide down. You can certainly study it. Instead, I'll try to explain in plain English the essence of what we're trying to communicate here. Let's suppose that you have a 9-step process that any prospect must move through in order to become a customer. Well, you can say that step 1 and step 2 are necessary. You can't skip them. You have to go through them. If you skip them, you can't become a customer, because let's suppose that step 1 or 2 asks for your name and address. However, even if I give you my name and address, while that's necessary, it isn't sufficient. It's not enough to make me a customer. Until I actually give you my credit card or whatever it is that you're using to charge me, I'm still not a customer. So the difference is that steps 1 through 8 are perhaps necessary, but step 9 is sufficient. When we achieve that, we've achieved what's most important. Now, why does that matter? Because, you may find that when you're trying to optimize a process to produce the highest possible or the best possible yield, that in the beginning of your experiments and your design, you may have to focus on just getting more people from the home page to the cart. And that will and could necessarily produce a significant lift, but that may yet fail to produce the downstream lift that you need in the final stages of the cart. Because while you get more people to start the process, you may have problems in the cart. You may have significant friction issues or anxiety issues or technology issues in general that are preventing many people from getting through the process. Still, if you intentionally increase the number of people going into that process, you've had a success. And you'll need to position it that way with your management team so that you can get the influence you need to keep testing in the right way. Ultimately, none of that will matter, though, if you don't reach sufficient in your conversion process. You've got to get more people to make that final step where they convert from being a prospect into a true customer. Learning the difference between necessary and sufficient conversion steps allows you to calibrate your testing program and to focus on subcomponents so that you get all of those steps eventually exactly right. You might work really hard on just the final step. That would be the sufficient step. But if you don't put more people into the funnel, you'll still lose because you've got more people converting that start the process, but you don't have enough starting the process. So see, the difference becomes really important. Now, you can see an example of what I mean when you look at this cart. Let's suppose that all those initial steps are very, very important. They're necessary, but until the order is complete, they're not a customer. That final step is where the ultimate conversion takes place. And we might liken this, by the way, and something we're going to talk about later, as the difference between the micro yeses and the macro yes. We won't discuss it in today's class, but it's coming. If you can get all the micro yeses correct, you'll get the macro yes. It's very important, though, that if you lose just one of those necessary steps, if someone says no there, you lose them completely. So we have to optimize every juncture. In each of those are sort of important conversion aspects of our research. So Beware of this and beware of focusing on the wrong conversion rate and not understanding how they all work together to produce the highest possible result. We saw this problem in 2000. I was very engaged in the internet in those days. We started the research program in the 80s, formalized it in 1990. I watched the dot-com bubble. I remember the buzz right up to the great collapse. And the collapse didn't surprise most of us. Many people were talking about new business rules, the world has changed, but basic elements of business have not and will not change. And in this case, what we had is a lot of entrepreneurs focused on building a big audience. But they had no clue as how to convert that audience from being just prospects or viewers or visitors to customers. And eventually, despite enormous valuations placed on those businesses, they collapsed. And the dot-com bubble is now a part of history. Very clearly, in a very simple way, if we look at the numbers, we can see that they focused on the wrong conversion rate. And it produced a disaster in business history. But let's keep going. When testing, the conversion rate must be the primary metric. So if I'm trying to figure out what conversion rate matters right now, well, I'll tell you how you discover that. The first is the research question that's driving your experiment. And the second is the overall business objective that the experiment is trying to serve. When you know that clearly, you can pick the right conversion rate and get it correct in your test protocols. Let's go back then. And believe it or not, you've done very well. We're almost done. The last few moments, to me, are the most interesting of everything we've been talking about. So I'm grateful that you've stayed with us, and now let's sort of cash in what we've been learning. So you saw this at the beginning. I asked you to select which price point. I also showed you that the lowest price point produced the highest conversion rate. But remember, our experiment was focused on a very important research question. Let's look at it. Which price point will generate the greatest financial return? Now that's a different question than which price point will produce the highest conversion rate. And this is a fine example of how sometimes we can get very confused. So think again. You did give me an answer, and you did have a reason for that answer. That was your hypothesis. Let's inform your hypothesis with further data from the initial test. So what if we took cancellation rate into account? What if we factored that in? Meaning that, more people convert, but how quickly did they cancel? How long did they last? So if they're paying X dollars a month, how many months did we get those dollars? Well, when you factor that in, you'll know that the rate that matters now is the lowest. In other words, we want the lowest cancellation rate. So which price point had the lowest cancellation rate? Well, the first one did. So once again, it looks like the control, the 99-cent price point, is the best. Conversion rate's 2.18, and the cancellation rate is 41% compared to 60% for treatment 4. But is that still the best price point to roll out? All over the world, people have rolled out pricing without ever going through this process that we're sharing and talking about together. And even those companies which think they've been successful with their pricing don't know how much they're leaving on the table. Actually, you never know if you've charged the right price until you've charged too much and then back down from there. That's why the experimental design is so important. So, thinking about that, what if we took revenue per subscriber into account? Now, let me help you conceptually. For some of you, you grasped instantly what I meant. Others of you are still sort of wrapping your brain around all this. Well, we know that if we charge 99 cents a week, the revenue per subscriber is lower, but we also are getting more subscribers. On the other hand, if we charge $4.99 a week, the revenue per subscriber could be higher. However, both of these are going to be impacted by cancellation rate. So it might look obvious, well, if you charge $4.99 a subscriber, you're going to have more revenue, but not necessarily. It depends on when they cancel. So what do we learn about cancellation and revenue per subscriber? Ooh, well, this starts to make you think again. So wait a second, on that basis, clearly treatment 4 is the right number. It's $130.42 per subscriber. But of course, if you're savvy, you've thought about that and said, yeah, but you've got less subscribers. You're finally getting close to the calculation of the most important numbers that will sort of impact the findings of our experiment. And really, help us think even deeper about conversion rates. So let's ask a different question. What do we really mean when we say conversion in this experiment? And because of that question, I have to remind you of what the research question was, which in my own paraphrase words is simply this: which price point produces the most revenue? In fact, I think the research question said return. Well, that's now factoring all the elements we've discussed. And when we do that, we find the true winner in this experiment. You can see it in this chart. If you look at the cancellation rate, you can see it going up with each price point. The price points are at the bottom. Cancellation rate goes up. You can see where it sort of flattens out. And then on the left-hand side, you can sort of understand those numbers and the percentages on the right. But look at the orange line and look where revenue is maximized. Now, all that you're seeing is a chart representing the very same table we were looking at earlier with that revenue factor calculated. In fact, we're doing the basic division that informs all of our conversion findings. But now, factoring it all together, we discover this. Which one of these price points produces the highest return? Believe it or not, it's certainly not the first one. It is the third treatment, $3.99. Now, if you wonder how important is all of this, I think it's easier to answer by just looking at the far column on the right. Look at the column on the far right and look at the first number. We know that conversions were 2.18%. That's high. That's really good. But how much money do we make from that? $17,170.54. On the other hand, conversion dropped at 2.18 to 1.65%. Not the conversion of the overall problem, just the conversion in terms of the number of people that said, yes, I'll be a subscriber. It dropped to 1.65%. But the price point was 3.99, and the total revenue was more than double the revenue for the 99-cent price point. This is what happens when we bring together good science and apply the heuristics and think through a process, and especially when we understand what the conversion rate is that we should be paying attention to. And I might add, just in closing this whole time out together, and it's not on a slide, it doesn't need to be, I just want you to understand that even then, this still might not be the best answer. Can anyone listening to me right now think of when that answer could still be probably incorrect? Let me help you. What if you have multiple offers and this offer gets a new member into your community, and it's very clear that at the treatment 3 price level, you make the most money. But you also have less people joining your community. What if over the long term, with cross-sell and upsell or other strategic initiatives that I don't even know about, including how your business is valued, you determine that I'll benefit more by having the most possible members, subscribers? Well, then you might find that treatment 3 is still not the right answer. But barring all of that, saying that that's not really a factor, then what you've discovered through this process of truly understanding conversion and running a good experiment, what you've discovered is what the real price point should be. When you stop this moment that we have together and you begin your work, I want you to walk away with sort of an appreciation for the simple definition of conversion, but along with that, a deeper appreciation of the importance of thinking about which conversion rate truly matters and looking at the big picture so that you inform your decision with all the right data sets. Thank you very much.
This concludes Session 2, Defining the Term Conversion, of the course MMC 5436, Messaging Methodologies and the Practice of Conversion Optimization. We began this session by defining the term conversion as it applies to marketing. Essentially, it is the change that results from the influence of the marketer upon the prospect's free choice. We also discovered that there are 3 different implications of conversion within the marketing sphere. From there, we learned the definition of conversion rate and how to measure it. We also learned the importance of using conversion rate as the primary metric when testing.